It's time for your favorite video of the month, the crowdfunding look back. So, November 2021. Let's talk about it for a second here, because there's not very many games on this list. This video is going to be a little bit shorter this month because November 2021 was kind of a dip in things. November 2022, we won't have a shortage of popcorn talking next year when we do this video, but let's go right into it. Because there were a few that sort of raised some eyebrows at the time and sort of still are raising some eyebrows. So let's do this. The biggest one of the month. The Elder Scrolls, the adventure game, Skyrim. Modiphius. I don't know. I mean, I guess that this has been relatively well received. I mean, I think it has like a 7.5 Board Game Geek rating right now. And the deluxeification, the plasticification of this game was very evident during the Gamefound campaign. And I just never really saw the desire for it. And one of the other videos I'm going to be putting out either right before this or right after this is talking about my feelings about the video game genre being imported to the tabletop scene as a whole. And this is a classic example of it where it's fine. It's good, right? It's good. That's what most comments have been about most IP video game based properties on the tabletop have been. And the more anticipated one is going to be coming next year from Chip Theory Games, just by Chip Theory's pedigree. Not to say anything about Modiphius here with this Skyrim version versus their Elder Scrolls version in a different time period. But this is trying to do all of the minutia, just like we're seeing now with Slay the Spire, we're seeing it with Monster Hunter, we're seeing it with Elden Ring. How much of this minutia that the video games do you want to have in this game? How much plastic do you want in these expansion after expansion after expansion? Because now all of these are launching, except, I give kudos to Slay the Spire here, not having 6 expansions when they launched. It's just, do you need something that simulates it? The problem with these is they're so trying to stay true to the game that they make it almost too true. They stay too close to the source vested material, and it makes it too much like a video game where you're having to keep track. I mean, the whole point of the computer is to let the computer do some of the tracking for you. And again, they killed it on crowdfunding. No doubts about it in terms of monetary value. Now, the other thing that goes along with all of these, I always wonder, what does the IP value look like when you talk about these things, right? Like, what is the break-even point? With Avatar, the movie just being announced, like they need to make $2 billion to get the break-even point. This raised 1.25 million pounds. I'm guessing that's well above the break-even point, but at the same time, this is a larger IP from the video game scene, so how much above that actually was it? What is the profit margin? Because I know the profit margin, no matter how big you are, it's not good. It's not great. So take it for what it is. I mean, and when you pull up the page here, again, you can see the funding amount. You can see how much they raised and 20-some thousand odd people that backed it. And they've got their copies, which was right on time or even slightly early, which is actually incredible because I guess Modiphius said at the beginning of this campaign, they had pretty much everything set. This wasn't one where they went in half-baked, half-cocked, and said, okay, we don't have stuff done, we don't have the files, we don't have the setup, we don't have the... They went in saying, okay, we have a lot of this stuff already done, and there's not going to be a whole lot of changes from what you see, from what you get it. And there's a lot of the upkeep, there's a lot of the components that go along with this, and the deluxe tier that was going to have all these miniatures, and do you need all that stuff? And they revamped some of the pledge tiers during the campaign. Here are all your bunches and bunches of add-ons. Do you really need a 5 to 8 player expansion? Like, I can't think of a miniatures game apart from Cthulhu Wars that people would even contemplate paying, that people would even contemplate playing 5 to 8 players. I can't imagine the downtime and the upkeep with this sort of expansion right here. Again, I'm not going to argue the value. They make it so the FOMO is real, the value is real. The core value here was 82 pounds. I know it's selling for more than 82 pounds. I think it's selling for like 95 bucks or so on the few retailers' websites that I have seen perusing over the Black Friday deals, because I don't think it's marked down for Black Friday either. So I'm not worried about, are you going to get your money back, right? That's a whole nother price, and that's a whole nother video, and that's a whole nother thing. But are you going to play this? Are you going to play it all the way through? How many of these do you have? Anyway, enough on that rant, enough on that rave. One of the other things that this reminds me of is it has a video from he who shall not be named on this channel, who banned me. So take that for what you will. But that's pretty much it. I think people are happy-ish with it. I haven't seen too much either way, though. Like, not making waves, I guess, for being bad is good. It's not like Jurassic Park Legacy, but also I don't see anyone hyping it either. You don't see any of the major channels hyping it, and maybe they're not into it yet. Maybe because there's been Slay the Spire and Elden Ring and Oathsworn and all these other ones coming out that it's just gotten dwarfed. I mean, I know I've gotten some releases and some games that I have not gotten out yet to you guys because it's been dwarfed by some of the other bigger names that are just taking up some of the hotness in the mental space. But that's sort of what I look at with this too. So take that for what you will. The next one we're going to talk about is Weather Machine, the latest Eagle Gryphon Lacerda game. It's already been delivered to backers. It was delivered on time. Mostly everybody has their copy at this point, and you're a crazy weather person trying to stop the weather from going crazy because of a crazy weather machine. I mean, crazy, right? It reminds me of the kids movie Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Anyway, that would be a great retheme. We talk about rethemes of like social deduction games all the time, right? Like retheme this with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and I'd be all over playing this game. Hey kids, let me introduce you to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the board game. They'd love it until their eyes glazed over in the 30-minute explanation. Anyway, this raised over $1 million, again, $1.1 million from Eagle Gryphon Games, and it's got an 8.0 rating right now on Board Game Geek, which again is great, but I feel like especially the heavier games, the more complex games of the Euro nature, of the worker placement nature on Board Game Geek, they tend to have a much higher selection bias, meaning you don't have people outside of that very niche group playing those games, and so the ones that are attracted to them in the first place are the ones that are going to be liking them in the first place more. And I think you also have a smaller subset of those, and so when you Venn diagram both of those, you're gonna get an overall higher rating unless people really just don't like it. And now you guys are going to tell me in the comment section down below that, oh well, that happens on other. It really doesn't. You don't have as much unity and selection bias in that sense, especially in combination with the number of backers, as you do with some of the other campaigns that are, say, on the other end or other spectrum of the mechanistic approach, the Amerithrash, the plastic heavy, the miniature driven side of things. I think you have a much more diverse crowd that goes into there. I think you have larger numbers overall. And I think you also run into a phenomenon that I'm also going to cover in another video of the oddity from hobby hatred, of rating things in that sense. So anyway, it's being relatively well received, but this is one of those games. I mean, I've dabbled, you saw my Unconscious Mind video. If you didn't, I mean, you guys apparently really liked either Unconscious Mind, I'm going to go with it, it's probably that, rather than me covering Unconscious Mind, because you guys gave me a ton of views for that, much more than my typical review video. And so if you want to see more of that, maybe I'll have to delve into that. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm going to be very select because, again, the overlap there and my comfortableness and comfortable level are going to be a little bit all over the place as well. But I don't know if this one's going to be any good. I mean, people like it. And so any of these games, On Mars, this one, the Inventors one that's going to be coming out in 2023 on crowdfunding, they're all going to run you about $100 to $120 plus or minus, pledging plus or minus shipping. How many of these do you need? How many of these do you have? How many Lacerdas? Because the Lacerdas also tend to be like the leaders, as well as the Fantasias, as well as the Shem Phillips and Garfils, where people who tend to get them tend to get a majority of them. I don't see too many people that are like, you know what? I think I'll get one Lacerda, please. What would you like today on the menu? I'd just like one Garfield games, please. Or I'd like one root. Not all of the root, but just one of the root, please, sir. I don't see that. I don't see that. And that's okay. I guess the other thing I'll say is I see a lot more similarity and grouping on the Euro side of things, as opposed to the skirmish or the miniature or the Amerithrash that I just mentioned, where you get like, okay, I'm going to get a Seamon, I'm going to get an Awakened Realms, I'm going to get a Mythic, right? Or, something along those lines. And, it's not just like I get all the Seamons, right? There are those people. And so it's my selection bias here speaking. So I'm wrong. So don't listen to anything I say, but it's just an interesting phenomenon when I look at that and just sort of see people comment all the time. I see more of that through my lens, my very narrow, jaded green colored lens. But anyway, so what else do you need to know? I mean, there's not really a whole lot else to talk about. Like I said, here's the page. Eagle Gryphon Games, boom, there you go with the latest update. They're finishing the fulfillment across the whole world right now at this point. So there's not really a whole lot else to mention, unless you're one of those people that has an incomplete Pledge Manager, and you didn't do it, and this is somehow reminding you. This is, again, probably one I'd have to watch and see, but like I said, price point wise, you're talking $130 to get it nowadays. They've got a pedigree, they've got a type, you've got a type, I've got a type. This is one where if it wasn't too heavy, and what's the rating here, 4.4, it's probably too much for me. Because I'm good at very tactical. I'm not very good at strategic. People always look at them and I feel like they say these are super strategic. I can't even handle like Yokohama, so maybe I could now though. That was one of my first Euros when I played. So that was, sort of an aberration. But I mean, you can get all the other ones that they talked about in the campaign here. And again, I have no clue how these compare, or, some people have their Lacerda rankings and Lacerda preference list. And I think this one or even On Mars would be the most interesting ones thematically for me. But again, probably the more recent upcoming one as well. The Inventors one is even more so. So there you go. That's Weather Machine. Overall, my hype on that was, with the first two of these both, rather low. I kind of hoped Elder Scrolls was going to be higher, but both of them by the end of the campaign, again, no interest in either of them, probably a 3 on both sides, and it stays true. So next up, Resurgence from Half a Kingdom Games, 1 to 4 players, survivor group in post-apocalyptic, I'm going to mess that up if I'm not careful, Moscow. You've got sort of your create a deck building, competitive Euro style game, and it's going to have bag building, it's going to have worker placement, hidden worker placement, and resource management. This was one that I saw a lot of media channels hyping as being like a really, really, really good Euro-style game. But it was interesting because the funding didn't necessarily reflect that. The funding was only $87,000, which it was one of those where it's probably one of the more recent big dichotomies of hype being up here and funding being down here. And again, I don't know why. It's got about an 8 rating right now on Board Game Geek. People really like it. It's actually got a higher rating than Weather Machine. Take that for what you will. It only has 168 ratings though, so that's compared to Weather Machine's almost 600. So a little bit of, just not high enough power to determine if that's a true ranking or rating yet or not. This one's actually probably closer to what I would be comfortable with weight-wise, and this one was one that I looked at heavily as a, would this be a good Liege dip into a la Unconscious Mind? So I have it actually on my trade list on Board Game Geek as something I'm looking and interested in potentially acquiring at some point. So don't be surprised if you saw a review from me in like 6 months. But this is the type of game that I look at on crowdfunding and I go, hey, I'm willing to trade for a copy. I'm not willing to shell out the money for a copy. And one of the upcoming games, the next game I'm going to talk about as well, is going to be very similar in that same sense. There's not necessarily enough to entice me on the crowdfunding side of things, but there is enough to make me interested in wanting to play it. Interestingly enough, you go over to the Board Game Geek forums, and one of the most recent threads on there is, where are all the reviews? Because, like I said, there weren't that many people. It's 2,000 people, $87,000. It's not a lot of reviews. That's not a lot of copies out there in the first place. Hype is probably about a 5 or 6. Stayed probably about a 5 or 6. It was deluxeifications that I didn't really think were absolutely necessary for me, for the most part, of why you would get it now. That's going to be the question is, does this hold true down here of no guarantee of wide release? Will it have a wide release? I have no idea. I haven't really searched for it. I haven't really had it on my radar in terms of, is it going to be or is it available elsewhere? But if it continues to have good hype, and like that forum thread said, Man vs. Meeple and Dice Tower are going to have reviews out in the next month or two, expect to see it get a little bit of a, sorry, I can't resist, I'm sorry, resurgence, and potentially even having something like a second Kickstarter campaign in order to get a reprint at some point in the future, Vassal's Law. So that's a little bit of everything you need to know about Resurgence. And it's already delivered, so you can check it out if you want. The next one up here is Hamlet. Hamlet, the village building game from Mighty Boards. This is another one that I said, okay, I'm not a big civ builder. I'm not a big city builder. I'm like a 7 on this. I'm still sort of wavering 6 and 7 because the main crux of getting it, again, was a deluxeification a la something like Everdell, where they had this really fancy little Hamlet house thing that was kind of nifty neato to have. It was a cardboard church. That's what it was. And so I looked at it and I said, that's cool, but there's no gameplay. And so I don't need just the deluxeifications right now on crowdfunding. I am happy, as you've heard me spout on this channel plenty of times, the majority of the times, with less deluxeifications, less price, and later delivery or acquiring than other people. And that's just my own personal bias when it comes to this. It is basically a hex-laying town builder. Combinatorial, tiny towns in sort of a suburbia skin, if you will, is the vibe it gives me. Is it going to play like that? I don't really know. I'm not really sure what to expect with it. I heard some complaints about some of the size of the components and the tiles and the management of that side of things. And it's got sort of a middling 7 review ranking right now and rating on Board Game Geek. So it's not wholly one way or the other. It's very akin to where some of these others are, like Elder Scrolls, for example. So that's going to be the question. I know that they were selling copies over at Essen, and I believe they're in the process of updating and fulfilling it right now. So here we pull up the latest update, almost actually more than a month prior to me filming this. So they say everything, especially North America here, should be fulfilling imminently. And you should be having your game real soon if you don't already have it from that aspect. Actually, I think I got an email months ago about possibly a review copy, so don't be surprised if I end up with a review copy, but this is also one very, very similar to Resurgence. If I don't get a review copy, it's still going to be higher on my trade list to try and get it, to try and talk about, because it's one I could see myself going very much either way on, which is why my hype was about a 6 or 7. Mitigated, one of those where I'm happy to support them, but I'm also happy to support them at the retail side of things because the deluxifications don't do anything for me from that aspect. So, and if you're one of those people like me, great. If you're not, if you went deluxifications, I mean, again, we all have the ones that we pick and choose. So this is no different. This was one of those for me. Hamlet, the village building game. And this is right on time too, because they had it being December of 2022. Although for some reason I have it not in English right here fully. So December. Take that for what you will. There you go. So what do we got up next? Ah, that's right. We have Monsterpocalpyse. Monsterpocalpyse, the latest iteration of it from Mythic Games. I don't know. This was a lot of money for a lot of plastic, and Mythic has been a little bit behind, I think, with several of their projects, and it's sort of had a trickle-down effect. Darkest Dungeon, Wave 1, I think. Wave 1? Are they doing multiple waves? I think so. Was just recently being delivered. Monsterpocalpyse was a relatively well-received game when it came out, and this was basically a relaunch of it. And it's just giving you more monsters, like more of a skirmish style King of Tokyo, if you will. But I looked at it as with this stuff, is it really looks kind of nifty neato, but I don't need any big miniature skirmish games, right? Like I have plenty card and cardboard skirmish games that are much less expensive, much more safe in terms of what I know I'm getting, and it's not nearly as much money. So I didn't really have an issue again because Mythic also did more of the, okay, it's not going to be exclusive. It's going to be maybe retailer exclusive just from us. And you're looking here at, just for the intro pledge to get you upgraded, $60. And if you really want to get anything, it's going to cost you triple digit price point to get in at $120 and or $160. The problem is when you go over to the updates here, the latest update from over a month ago at the time of me filming this says that, okay, well, here's the rule book. Okay, great. Here's the rule book. But now we've only got the layout and the work for the models done. So they run you through some of the card play and the layouts here for all this stuff, right? But the problem with that is, this is October 2022 we're talking about. The delivery date was supposed to be November 2022. So they're just finishing the layout. So if you think this is going to be anytime even in the first half of 2023 at this point, I would say you're looking Q3 of 2023, which is sort of slightly disappointing because I would imagine that Mythic is going to have another project or two well before then launching on crowdfunding. But yeah, I would imagine that they're going to have something else coming up soon because it's, sort of around the time that we haven't seen them recently. So I would be surprised if by January we don't have another project. And how much is that project going to delay or potentially run into issues with this? Run into issues with this one? I have no idea. I have no idea, but that's always my concern. If you're this far behind on this one, there has to be some trickle down effect on one or the other. So again, hype was probably a 3 or a 2. Hype is still about the same. It's a 1 or 2. No interest in this type. I know a lot of people do though, and this is definitely going to be a money raiser because of the plastic. So it did well, $1.3 million, say what you will. Now we have another one that was sort of a little bit of a bigger IP grab, but it again sort of underperformed. And I'm not sure why. I think the perceived value based on the pledge levels was the issue. And this is Pathfinder Arena. And the IP Pathfinder is sort of almost synonymous with what people know about Pathfinder, just like Elder Scrolls. And although the Elder Scrolls game stayed really true to the Elder Scrolls, Pathfinder kind of went, a sideways route. The shifting tile-based skirmish game where you're picking up chips that upgrade your powers that you can manipulate. And so like the upgrading of the powers and being able to change how the stats are in each and every single turn was cool, but the gameplay of like the monsters shifting and the attacking was just kind of, it just, you know, I did a preview review on it and it just kind of left me underwhelmed. And I think that's the campaign. Like, they had a lot of stuff in the stretch goals that they wanted to hit to make the value seem like it was good for what it was, because the price level of the pledges was relatively significant compared to that. I mean, the pledge levels, again, were relatively high. You had this standee version, I think, which was a late add-on, maybe even $40. Then it was the basic with the standees and the miniatures here for $85, $100, $125, $140, and all the way up to $165, with 4 expansions included. And I just wonder, you know, should some of those been included with the base game? How necessary are they? How swingy are they? It just kind of left me, again, wanting and a little bit lacking overall. And the other problem that they say here, again, is November 2022. So it should be delivering at the time I'm filming this. But they say with the latest, not even the latest, the second most recent update, they've opened the Pledge Manager for a 3rd time. That's never a great sign either. But they run down right here, all the way back in August, they're saying it's going to be delayed by 6 months. And it's going to be in March-ish. I haven't really seen anything else, because you got shipping update, Pledge Manager, Pledge Manager, Pledge Manager updates in the last 3 months, or 4 months even. So no update on kind of where things are at overall. But if they're already telling you 3.5 months ago that they're going to be 6 months late, I have to imagine it's going to be potentially even later than that with some of the miniatures and the plastic. And because I also don't see any file updates. I don't see anything that even the Mythic update gave you from that sense of where things are going to be at and how, you know, how it's actually progressing. Like, there's no chart that says, okay, we're X% here, or it's filled along. I like those charts, by the way, crowdfunding campaigns. So I don't know. It left me just going, okay, did you need all this stuff? How much difference is all this stuff? Could it have all been the standees? I mean, when I think of Pathfinder and RPGs, like, Pathfinder is really well known for having the Pathfinder standees. I have a couple boxes of them when I played RPGs, when I played Dungeons and Dragons, we used those. Those are very prevalent. If you go to, you know, Pathfinder's website, that's what they sell. So I was a little surprised by the fact that they went miniature heavy here, and I just feel like people didn't feel like it was a good price point investment when it launched, and I think that stalled it. It actually lost money for more than a couple days, I believe. One of the few that I've seen do that recently that actually has broken 6 figures at the same time. So just kind of a weird, odd course. Again, probably a 3 or 4. Easily that at this point too. So there you go. That's it, short and sweet. I told you there wasn't a whole lot to look back on in November of 2021. So November 2022 will be a lot bigger. We'll have a lot of popcorn munching. If you missed Elder Ring, if you Slay the Spire, all that fun stuff. We're going to be talking about that a year from now and kind of seeing where that's at, right? That's going to be a good time. Oh, gosh. And you know what? In 2 more months, I think I've been doing these video series now for a year. So I'll be able to look back 2 years and say, how does this game stand up? Do you still have this game? Should you get this game at this point, or just a little bit further rather than just is it delivered and where is it in terms of production and hype from that aspect? So that'll be fun to do. I'll start doing that probably in January. So still won't have Primal. That'll be one of the ones in January because Primal the Awakening still won't be there. Although, was that just this past? I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know. I don't want to think about it. Too much thinking. It'll just tell me how long I've been waiting for games like that. Anyway, that's all I got. Let me know what you think. Let me know where things are at for you, what you backed, what you didn't back, highs and lows of the look back as well. Any of these that were hits or misses or anything else from that month that you can kind of remember or recall. If you're like me, though, it's probably not too much because I'm a back it and forget it most of the time. I like sort of open the emails and I sort of just delete the emails unless it's something dealing with a pledge manager that I haven't done because I'm bad about that doing that too. So anyway, that's all I got. Stay classy. See you around.